All right, we're going to start section 2.3 here. Solving section 2.3 is about solving polynomial equations. Okay, so equations that have x squared and x in it. So instead of just solving basic equations, now we got to solve these that have the x squared in there. Okay, so if there is an x squared in there, okay, there's just a couple options you could have. The first one we're going to talk about is the square root method. You will use the square root method if there's no x at all. Okay, so if there's just 2x squared and there's no additional x, okay? Or similarly here, where the squared is outside one of these values here, okay? So in order to solve this, 2x squared is equal to 24, okay? What they want you to use is the square root method. Okay? And if you're going to use the square root method, everything has to be on the other side besides the square. Okay, so if I'm multiplying by 2 to solve this, I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2 right away. And that way I have x squared is equal to 12. And then to get rid of the square, I can just square root it. Now, anytime you take a square root of a square, okay, just like 3 squared is equal to 9, I also have negative 3 squared is equal to 9. Okay, so when I'm getting rid of, like, let's say this was x and this was x, if I'm getting rid of this square and I square root it, okay, I'm going to get a value of positive and negative. Okay, so anytime you square root a square, okay, you're going to have to put plus or minus on the other side. So x is going to be equal to plus or minus square root of 12. Okay, now we need to simplify square root of 12. So what perfect square goes into 12? Again, the perfect squares are 4, 9, 16, anything you can square root, 25, 36, 49, so on. So one of the perfect squares that go into it is 4. So radical 4, square root of 3, and then the square root of 4 is 2. Okay. So my answers to this is going to be x is equal to plus or minus 2 square root of 3. Okay. The next one, solve the following quadratic equation by the square root method. Again, it'll tell you on this what method it really wants you to use. Okay. Now you could factor this or FOIL this out and then use the quadratic equation. You could do that, but sometimes the square root method is easier than that. Okay, because you can square root, you don't have to FOIL all this. All right, so if I have plus 121, I need to get that to the other side because I want to square root this. So I'm going to have 7z plus 4 squared is equal to negative 121. Okay. Well, what I need to do is get rid of this square. Okay, so I'm going to square root that. Okay, and if it was a cube, I would cube root it. If it was to the fourth, I would fourth root it, whatever. Okay, so I square rooted that, the square goes away. So I'm left with 7 z plus 4 is equal to, again, when I get rid of the square, I have to put plus or minus, and then the square root of negative 121. Well, remember the square root of 121 is equal to 11. And since it's negative, I had to pull out I, square root of I, which is equal to, or square root of negative 1, I'm sorry, which is equal to I. So square root of negative 121 is 11i. And now I need to solve from there. Okay, so to solve for z, you can move the plus 4 over. So I do that by subtracting. So 7z, and again, this is I. So when I subtract 4, I can't subtract it from the 11i. It's two different terms. Is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 11i. And then I got to get rid of the 7. So I'm going to divide by 7. Okay, and so I'm left with z is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 11i divided by 7. So you do that. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to clear this. We'll move to the next ones. Okay. Now we want to use it with the quadratic equation. The quadratic equation is on your formula sheet. Okay. But the quadratic equation is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And again, you'll use that when you have something as a times x squared plus b times x plus c is equal to some value, or is equal to 0. Has to be 0. You got to have it equal to 0 over here first. Otherwise, you can't use the this equation yet. Okay. Okay. So if I want to solve this by using the quadratic equation again, this would have to be, because I have to make it equal to 0. So y squared. I do that by adding 4y. So plus 4y plus 6 equals 0. My a value is 1. The value in front of your y. Your b value is 4. And my c value is 6. If it was minus 4y, this would be negative 4. So on. So now I just plug it in the equation. So negative b, so negative 4, plus or minus square root b squared, so it'd be 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 6, all divided by 2 times a, 2 times 1. Okay. If I simplify it, once you're in there, now you just have to simplify it. Negative 4 plus or minus radical 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 1 times 6, which is 24, all divided by 2. Keep simplifying. Negative 4 plus or minus square root 16 minus 24 is negative 8 divided by 2. Getting closer. I'm going to simplify the square root of radical 8 minus, I'll do that over here, square root of negative 8. Again, that's I. You got to pull that out. And that pulls the negative out. Then break down. So that's negative 1. Break down 8 would be the radical 4, radical 2, and the square root of 4 is 2. Okay. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. Not I, negative 1, and this is I. Not negative. Sorry. So this would be 2 radical 2 times I, which would be 2I radical 2. 2I radical 2 divided by 2. And if you can simplify it, everything has to be divisible. Okay, not the radical, but here, here, and here all have to be divisible by the same numbers. Okay, and they are. Everything's divisible by 2. So I divide every single number by 2, and I get negative 2 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so it's just going to be I radical 2 divided by 2 divided by 2 is 1. So this is your answer. Now it's going to say separate multiple answers with a comma. Okay, so your two answers to this, okay, is negative 2 minus I radical 2. There's one. And then the other one is going to be minus 2 plus I radical 2. Those are your two answers that it'll ask for. Okay. All right, move on. All right. Next one. Solve the following quadratic equation by factoring. Okay, so you had the quadratic equation, which is always available to use. You could always do that. You have the square root, and then sometimes it's going to ask you to do it by factoring, which factoring is a little bit easier than doing the square, the quadratic equation method. Okay, So again, you need it all equal to 0. So all this stuff on the right has to be on the left. Okay, so minus 7z squared. And again, you have to line it up, 7z squared minus 17z minus 17z, add 6. 6. Okay, so all those cross off. So I'm left with 0 on the left, or on the right. 8z squared minus 7z squared is just z squared. 7z minus 17z is minus 10z. And 16 and 6, or 10 and 6 is 16, is equal to 0. Okay, has to equal 0 on the right. Now, we can factor this out. Okay, the only two things that can multiply up to z squared is z and z. And then two numbers that multiply up to the end, but add up to the middle. So multiply to this one, add to this one. So two numbers that do that is 8 and 2, but since this is minus 10, it has to be minus 8 and minus 2. So then still equal to 0. So we have two solutions. We have z minus 8 is equal to 0, and we have z minus 2 is equal to 0. So what minus 8 is 0? Well, the answer to that is 8. And what minus 2 is equal to 0? The answer to that is 2. Okay. So, I'm sorry, not x, z is going to equal the two values of 2 and 8. Okay, the next one, it's going to solve by factoring. Again, you could do it similar to that. But notice you can factor out some stuff before we even start. If they have a greatest common factor, you can pull that out. So what goes into 5 and 10? Well, 5 does. So I can pull out a 5. Notice how this has a y and this has a y. I can pull out 5y. So I'm going to pull out 5y out of both. So 5y times, if I divide off 5y on this one, divide off 5y on this one, that went away, and one of the y's. So I'm left with just y. This one, I'm just going to be left with 2. So similar point, once I get to that point, I'm just going to go 5y is equal to 0. And I know y plus 2 is equal to 0. Two solutions. First one, y is equal to 0. When I divide by 5, y is still 0. And when I subtract off 2, y is equal to 2. So my two answers there. -2, 0. Okay. All right. The next one, we're going to solve by factoring again. Okay. So I got to have 0 on the right, have to. Okay. And then I'm going to write it in order. So 2y squared plus 7y minus 15 equals 0. Okay, so this one doesn't factor as easily as the one up there did. Because of this value in front of y, I can't just say y and y. Okay, what I can do is I could say 2y on one and y on the other, because y times 2y is equal to 2y squared. Okay. And it's a little bit easier since the factors of 2 is only 1 and 2. Okay. And then I'm going to look for the factors of 15. Okay, so which are 1. So the factors of 15. Whoa. 100% sure what I just did there. All right. Factors of 15 are 1 and 15, and then 3 and 5. Okay. Now, since it's -15, it could be -1 and 15, or -15 and 1, -3 and 5, or -5 and 3. And then you're kind of going to put a guess and check method where you're going to plug them in, and you're going to try to get them to add up to 7y in the middle. Okay. So if I look at this, if I put 5 opposite of 2, I'm going to get 10, because 2 times 5 is 10. And then if I put 3 opposite of y, I'm going to get 3. 3 and 10. Which if I look at 3 and 10, it has to be plus 7. So I make this one positive, this one negative, and that would be your 2 solutions. Okay. This factors out. Okay, so I have 2y minus 3, y plus 5 is equal to 0. So then I set them both equal to 0. 2y minus 3 is equal to 0. And then y plus 5 is equal to 0. So this one's y is equal to negative 5. This one, I got to add 3 to get 2y is equal to 3, and then divide by 2. So this one's y is equal to 3 halves. And those are your 2 solutions. Y is equal to solution set of negative 5 and 3 halves. Okay. All right, so that would be using the guess and check method on that. Okay, there's one more method that I want you to look at, and if you don't want to use it, don't. If you want to just look at it, that's fine. But it's called the slip and slide method. Okay, and I haven't seen this before, but it's pretty good. Okay, so what you do, okay, and the only issue you usually have on these is that 2's in the front. So what we need to do is get rid of it. And so what you do is you multiply this by 2 and you just get rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 2, and I need to remember that I multiplied that by 2 because I need to then cancel that out by dividing by 2 at the end. Okay, so when I do that, I get y squared plus 7y minus 30. Again, you're only multiplying the last number by 2. And then this is y squared, so it's y and y. Okay, then you look at 2 numbers that multiply up to negative 10 or negative 30, add up to 7. Well, that's positive 10 and minus 3. So this moves to this pretty. Bring that back up. Okay. So again, I lost it here. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to my computer there, but I believe where I was at was 2y squared plus 7y minus 15 0. I slipped and slided to 2, so I have y squared plus 7y minus 30. So I got y plus 10, y minus 3. Okay, but realize that I multiplied by 2 at the beginning, so I got to divide these by 2 at the end. Okay, and if you remember what the answers were from before, it was y plus 5, 2y minus 3. Okay, so when I divide by 2, this one works out. Notice the one on the left. Good, y plus 5. If you cannot divide it, so like 3 divided by 2, okay, to simplify that, you just multiply the front by 2. Or you multiply both by 2, and technically that goes away. So that'd be 2y minus 3. And notice, by the slip and slide method, I get the exact same thing I had before. My 2 answers of y is equal to negative 5. And add 3 divided by 2, 3 halves. It's called the slip and slide method. Okay. 2 left, and they're all about the rock being thrown with a velocity. Okay, so now we have some word problems. Okay, and they want you to fill this in. Test-wise, this is the most missed question on exams. This one right here. Okay, and they won't give you this one on the exam. They'll give you the next one on the exam, but they do give you this one on the homework. Okay, the first thing. Okay, if you went through physics at all, okay, you need to know the difference between meters and feet. Okay, 9.8 meters per second squared is the same thing as 32 feet per second squared, and g is gravity. G is gravity. Okay. So whichever one they give you, so this one's in meters on this one, you have to use 9.8. If they say feet, you got to use the 32. That's where most people miss this thing. Okay, so velocity of 11 meters per second, that is V. V naught is V, or velocity. H naught is initial height. So how far did they throw it off of? And then H is how high it is when it's traveling. Okay, so if I looked at this thing, here's my cliff. Okay, this one's saying it's thrown up at 11 meters per second. So I'm throwing this thing up and then it's coming back down. Okay, and my velocity that I'm throwing that up at is 11. Okay, now the H is how high it is. This H, the H on the left is how high. It says 10 meters from the water. Okay, so here's 10 meters. Okay, they're asking how long does it take to be flown up and come back down. Okay, and the cliff is 43 meters high. Okay, so this is 43 from here to here. Okay, so they give you the formula, you got to plug it in. It says how high or when will the rock be 10 meters? When is a question about time, so you'll plug 10 in for H. So 10 equals -1/2 velocity or gravity is 9.8. Notice it's 9.8 because we're in meters. T squared plus your initial velocity, which is 11. T plus your initial height, which is 43. And now you got to solve this out. Okay. And so when I solve it, I got to have 0 on the one side. So 0, I'm going to minus 10. I'm going to simplify this. So it's -4.9 T squared plus 11T, my minus the 10. So plus 33. Okay. And so now I'm going to use the quadratic equation on this. Okay. So I know A is equal to -4.3. I know B is equal to 11, and I know C is equal to 33. So a -11 plus or minus radical 11 squared minus 4 times A, which is -4.9. I don't know why I put 4.3. 4.9 times C, which is 33. All divided by 2A. Okay. Do the math, -11 plus or minus radical 121 minus 4 times 4.9 times 33, 646.8. And notice it's minus a minus, so this becomes a plus, 646.8. All divided by 2 times -4.9 is -9.8. Okay. Keep doing the math. I'm going to do it over here. Is equal to -11 plus or minus radical 121 plus 646, 767.8. All divided by -9.8. Square root that 767.8, 27.7. -11 plus or minus 27.7 divided by -9.8. And so I get two answers. The -11 minus 27.7, which would be -38.7 divided by -9.8. Or the other answer of -11 plus 27.7, which would be 16.7 divided by -9.8. Okay, so one of these answers is correct. Okay, so if I do the math here, 38.7 divided by 9.8, I get 4.0 seconds. And then this one, 16.7 divided by 9.8, negative, would be -1.7 seconds. Okay, so my two answers are -1.7 seconds and 4 seconds. And so I need to check to see which one do I think is correct. Well, if I throw that thing, okay, -1.7 seconds doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It can't be negative time. Okay, so if it travels in 4 seconds, it's going to be right here. Okay, so my answer is going to be 4 seconds. Now you'll have one more like that. Okay. Remove this stuff so you can see it. This is the one that's going to be on the exam. Okay. How long would it take for a ball dropped from the top of a 144-foot building to hit the ground? Okay. So we need to solve it similarly to what we just did. However, notice 144 feet. Okay, this is the most missed, and why it's missed is because people put the meters one in there. It says feet. Okay, so you have to use 32. Okay, for gravity. Feet is now 30, or yeah, gravity is now 32 feet per second squared. If the ball is dropped, how fast did I throw it with? Well, my velocity is going to be 0. Anytime it says dropped, my velocity is 0. Okay, so this is 0. The top of a 144-foot building, that's my initial height. Okay, if it hits the ground, that means h is equal to 0. All right, so I plug that in. Hit the ground, so h is now 0, is equal to -1/2. Gravity, since it's foot, it's 32. T squared. Plus my initial velocity, since it's dropped, this is 0. Plus my initial height, which is 144. Okay, so this crosses off. 0 is equal to -1/2 times 32 is 16. -16, I'm sorry, t squared. This went away because it's 0, so plus 144. All right, now to notice there's no t. Okay, so I could use the square root method to solve this. All I got to do is move over the 144. So -144 is equal to -16t squared. I could divide by -16 then. 144 divided by 16 is 9. So now 9 is equal to t squared. And so all I have to do is square root. Remember, when I square root that, it has to be plus or minus. So t is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. But notice, does -3 seconds make sense? No. Okay, so notice when this thing is just dropped, it takes 3 seconds to hit the ground. So the answer is 3 seconds. Okay, so again, I apologize for the glitchiness of that video at the end, but let me know if you have any questions on that. Okay, make sure you understand how to do that. Thanks.